So here are our amazing panels, and I will actually have Jeff start with the introduction.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. Very excited to be here. Just a quick background on me. I'm Jeff Liang. I head up digital product at EssenceMediacom, which is a global full-service media planning and buying agency located in New York. Just a little quick background about me. I'm very excited to be a part of this group, obviously. I'm one of the, Asians that have migrated over from Taiwan when I was very young, around when I was 10 years old, and have lived in New York area ever since. Went to college to do a typical, finance degree, and came out of school with a first finance job, couldn't take it anymore. And in about 1 month, I quit my job and moved back to New York from Boston to actually do to get into advertising, especially in the digital space, and loved it ever since. I've been in it for probably 20 plus years now. So really excited to be here and get to meet everybody and talk a little bit about my experiences.
Amazing. And then Prachi, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Prachi Priya, Chief Data Officer at Team One, which is a full service agency under Publicis Group. I am currently in transition, taking a summer break to spend some amazing time with my boys. We just came back from a 2.5-week Europe vacation. So if you want to know any tips about Iceland, I'm here for you. My official professional role is to empower businesses by providing thought leadership on the importance and power of data, how to be data inspired in a creative setting, because I'm a part of a creative agency, and how do we leverage data and human insights to drive business performance. In terms of my journey, I have been in this industry for more than 20 years, and I call myself a rebel with a cause. And since this is a platform, this is an agency and advertising platform, I'm guessing a lot of you will resonate with that. I have like a typical Asian Indian family, I have a degree in computer science. That's what I'm expected to do. I have a family of doctors and engineers. Then I fell out of love from the tech coding part. I became extremely fascinated by consumer behavior in terms of why do consumer behave certain way, but the whole why behind the buy. So then I decided to do my MBA in marketing, which was not very common at the time, and worked on both agency and business side, and finally found that all the decision making, foundation of all the decision making and better outcomes is data, which helps us understand the relationship with the consumers. So I pivoted back to data and analytics, and that's where I have been for almost my entire career now, right at the intersection of marketing, customers, and a deep focus on data and analytics. I'm really excited to have this chat today with everyone.
Amazing. And then Jolene, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here today. I'm Jolene Delisle, and I'm the founder and head of creative of The Working Assembly. The Working Assembly is a branding and creative agency partnering with emerging and evolving brands. So we have some fast growth startups like Zola, Museum of Ice Cream, Compass. And we also work with large Fortune 100 brands such as MassMutual, Match Group, and Pepsi. A large part of my professional life has been supporting BIPOC and female founders, and I help a lot of them incubate and launch their brands. So companies like Sanzo, which is an Asian sparkling water, and then Or and Peachy, which are here in New York, for example. I'm also a mother of 2 young children. I have a 4- and 6-year-old. And when I'm not in Manhattan running after them, I'm in the Hudson Valley, where last year I restored and reopened a 1950s ice cream shop called Cherries, which recently became a B Corp. And now I'm focusing its mission really on creating community and making food accessible to bridge the gap of food poverty, which is kind of prevalent up there. As someone who immigrated here to the US by way of adoption from South Korea at the age of 7, I started the early part of my life homeless with a single mother. So I think through that experience and growing up with a Caucasian family and in mostly a homogenous area, I didn't have many Asian friends and feel very connected or part of the community. And so for the past few years, I've been very committed to doing events like this one and providing mentorship and support to AAPI creatives as much as possible. So if anyone wants to get in touch after this, feel free to reach out. Anyway, I'm grateful to Liz and the team here to have me. So yeah, excited to chat with all of you.
Amazing. And last but certainly not least, we have Chris.
Thank you, Liz. And thanks to everybody at Asians in Advertising. An impressive group so far, new to me. You know, I'll be a longtime fan and hopefully participant moving forward. So thrilled to be on the panel today. I've been 30 years in toys and video games, with the last almost 19 years here at Mattel. Today, I'm Chief Design Officer. I have been for about 4.5 years. And what that means at Mattel is I lead product design, packaging, product development and engineering, consumer insights, e-com, things of that nature, where it's kind of the creative make side of the organization. And I'm based here in our headquarters, which is in Los Angeles. In El Segundo, right near LAX, for those of you that are familiar with the area. And those of you that are not as familiar with Mattel, and I see a little bit in the chat, but Hot Wheels, Polly Pocket, Masters of the Universe, American Girl, Fisher-Price, and of course, Babs, Barbie is all the pink heat right now. So a lot going on over here in this neck of the woods. I'm a parent of 9 and 12-year-old little girls. So they're the perfect petri dish of exploration, and have been for their lives while I've been here at Mattel making play. I'm biracial. I grew up in southwestern Michigan in a very rural town to a first-generation Chinese mom and a Detroit-born Caucasian dad. And I have been a designer and creative my whole career. And while not fitting directly into advertising, I think aspects of marketing communication and creative and other things, there's a lot in that, but always kind of at least for the last dozen or so years have been in creative leadership and in somewhat large scale teams. So thrilled to be here and can't wait for the conversation.
Amazing. We have a lot of big fans here across every speaker right now. But why don't we get started? So let's just get started. So only 6% of Fortune 500 company executives are Asian Americans, which proves how difficult it can be to grow. What are some of the challenges or obstacles you guys face on your path towards C-suite? So Jolene, I would love for you to start.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. You know, I think sometimes, especially as women and minorities, we can put obstacles kind of in front of ourselves before, you know, to try to challenge ourselves to be perfect before we kind of raise our hand or kind of jump into something. And I think something that I've been really challenging myself with for the past 10 years, I think has really altered my career trajectory, has really been this idea of saying yes and jumping in, maybe even before I'm ready. And so things I think about was like, you know, I jumped into being a product manager before I ever, you know, knew how to become one. I wasn't a mother until I became one. I wasn't a founder until I became one. You know, I wasn't a CEO until I became one. So I think, you know, oftentimes we kind of say, oh, this is something I will do and I can do. And we kind of put these like benchmarks and milestone and goalposts for ourselves that kind of keep on shifting. And I think, you know, part of that challenge when you give me that statistic, I think, you know, especially as Asians, like maybe culturally, you know, sometimes we are conditioned to kind of wait a little bit until it's our turn. I think sometimes instead of waiting for that turn, it's really a matter of making it our turn and kind of jumping ahead in that line. So I think that's definitely an obstacle that, you know, personally, I know that I face and I'm hoping to champion other people to not make that mistake.
Amazing. I totally resonate with that about like making that next step. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, you know, for me, my experience has been, you know, because I started out, you know, in the ad agency space, you know, probably 20 plus years ago, and I've been at, you know, tons of different agencies, small, large, independents. It was really difficult for me not to be able to see somebody that looked like me, to be that company leader, to be somebody obviously that you can aspire to, and look up to. So I do think that it's a challenge for all of us because it's less relatable. You know, those roles obviously inspire people. Their job is to make sure that, you know, the whole company understands its core values and mission and move forward under that. And then obviously, you know, me having been at 7, 8 different agencies in at least my earlier part of my career, I've not seen anybody that looks like me, talks like me, that can act like me, that's something I can relate to from a cultural standpoint to really connect with. And so I do think that's a challenge for all of us, but, you know, especially in recent times, I do think that's going to change. And I think it is already changing. And part of why I wanted to help this organization is to show that, you know, people like us can play in those roles. You know, it is something that we can break through in terms of barriers that currently still do exist. And it is something that will become, you know, more common as we have, you know, continue to see more faces of people like us in those roles. Even though it's not there, we're nowhere close to where we need to be now. I do think for folks that like us who have already been there, it's important and critical to get out there and to show that we can do this role so that the folks after us can find that, you know, this is someone that I can aspire to be, or somebody that can, you know, potentially replace. And, you know, if that person can do it, I can too. And so this is kind of the hope that we have, even though obviously it's disappointing to see, you know, that we're not necessarily as represented as we should be. But, you know, obviously there's hope, and I've seen a lot of improvement since when I first started 20 plus years ago. So I'm really, you know, I'll be optimistic that things will change.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm remaining optimistic as well too, especially because there's a whole new generation of younger people who are coming in with the diversity mindset of expanding the gap and everything. So a lot to look forward for. I know we know how critical mentorship and sponsorship is. I would love if you could tell us about your experience with finding or being a mentor or sponsor. Chris, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that for those of us that have had mentors, we know just what kind of values can come out of it. I do want to make a distinction between kind of how I see mentorship, which is based on a commitment. It's a verbal contract between two people where somebody is helping somebody else, and the commitment goes both ways. But I want to bring up the idea of advocacy, because advocates can sometimes be confused with and almost seem like mentors. And that's really, I think that the most powerful advocates are the ones that are based on merit. So I share it because I think for all of us, whether you are a representative of a minority group, or whether you're just in the work system at a small place or at a big place, I do think that the idea of establishing advocates can be incredibly powerful. The way that you typically do that is by showing some sort of value, and it could be looking out for somebody. It could be filling in a gap that needs to be filled in. It could be voluntary, or it can be based on a request. But I think that adding that authentic value, whether people are looking, like you don't have to be on stage or in a meeting in order to show that value. The spotlight can be off, and you can be adding value behind the scene in order to gain that advocacy. I will say, for me in my career, as important as establishing kind of a mentorship relationship with my boss, establishing a network of advocates has been material and significant in growth opportunities that either I saw, but more especially things that I didn't even see. And if that's the common method of operation that you have as an individual, building advocacy by adding true value, whether seen or not, I believe it's a winning proposition over time.
I totally agree. Creating an advocacy, a network, even like your mini community to support you in your career is so crucial for that growth. Prachi, I wonder if you have any other things to add about your experience with mentorship or sponsorship, or champions, what have you.
Absolutely, and I'm with you. We definitely need a combination of having mentors as well as sponsors, and I'm sure all of us get approached by a lot of youngsters to, can you be my mentor? And a few things that I definitely would want to highlight is when you are approaching, be prepared in terms of clear about your needs. What is your objective? What are you looking for? Come prepared with questions. And also be very action oriented. If you are looking for some feedback, if you're looking for some recommendations, or some suggestions, try and do those actions that are recommended by your mentor. I think that helps. Like having that open loop, a feedback loop, is very important. So, great list, engaged, all of that is applicable. And going back to the champion part of champion sponsors, I think it's very important, because those champions will be talking about you when you are not in the room. So how will they talk about you is very important. So, and that's why I'm coming back to, like, what is your vision? What is your need? That has to be clear to your mentor or sponsor too. So it's kind of like a loop. And I also say that I learn a lot from my mentees too. So it's kind of like reverse mentoring. I usually have people who are either in my field or either looking for leadership. So I always love to get fresh perspective too. So it's a win-win situation for both.
I would love to just for a moment build on Prachi's point. I think it's such an important one. Having one of your, maybe not mentor, but advocates as your boss, and being transparent about what your career ambitions and hopes are, can, to Prachi's point, it's really important that they're thinking about you, not just advocating for you, but thinking about you based on an understanding of where you aspire to go when you're not in the room, when situations happen, when changes organizationally, which they always do. It's the constant. When they happen, that they know not only are you interested and willing because you've already articulated that, but they can advocate with you if there's a readiness and a fit.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to add is it's actually something I learned from, I think, a Morgan Stanley mentorship class for Asians, is that for folks in our culture, a lot of our cultural background really focuses on, introspectively, that we need to work on ourselves in order to move up through the corporate world. It's all about us, our own skill sets. And what I find is that might be true to some degree, but as you get up higher in the corporate ladder, a lot of the positions and roles will depend on your network. And it's actually really important for all of us to understand the importance of mentorship and networking, because a lot of opportunities do come via those paths. And it's really important to also understand your blind spots. All of us have things to improve on. Some of the best athletes in the world will have coaches that help them get better. And so what I would say, the mentor piece is somebody that you can feel comfortable with to discuss things that you can talk about that you may not be able to talk about with your parents or your friends and family and so forth. I think it's just a great way to get some additional coaching, some mentorship, some support system that you really need in order to get to that level.
I was going to add one thing too, which is that I always advise people, especially those starting out in their career, to not scout jobs or companies, but to scout out bosses, because I do think looking at the people that you're going to be working for, looking at who the C-suite and who the leadership teams are, what's their makeup, how many, for me as a woman, like how many women are kind of sitting at that C-suite level. I think all those things are really critical. And I just share that because when I graduated from school, I had this idea in my mind of like these type of companies I want to work at. And I didn't know much about those companies, but they all were like huge brands and huge agencies. And they were the ones I was really excited about. And I didn't get a job at any of them. And I wound up getting a job at a very small place that was a really small team. And, at the time it felt I was a little bit defeated, but I think just working there and those 2 years I worked there was actually an incredible experience because I got to know absolutely everyone who worked at that company. I got to learn from so many different people within each department, even places I would never have had access to if I had gotten a job at one of those bigger companies. So I think it's really about making the most of where you are and trying to like build those relationships. All that to say is that one of my first clients at my agency now was actually someone who had hired me and wound up going to the client side at that agency and remembered me and like decided to, give me another shot. And that was, as on the client side. And so I think, it is really about building those relationships, even when you're younger and learning as much as you can and being open to those experiences.
I love that. It just resonates a lot with me because I think early in my career, I like went to like somewhere fancy because I thought that was expected. But going somewhere where you know the people will support you is so much more important than like that fancy name, having that on your resume for sure. If anyone ever wants to talk about that, we can chat. So yeah, all of you guys are very accomplished in your careers. I mean, you guys are in the C-suite panel. So how do you balance your professional work life with your personal life, as all of you are family, all of you have your own families, parents, and even lots of you have side projects to do. So I wonder what is the key to balancing all that to make it to where you are. Jolene, if you want to kick us off there.
Yeah, this is a question I get quite a lot. And because I'm someone who infamously loves side projects, I always have like 3 or 4 going at a time in addition to the company. And I think for me, I actually don't think it's really about balance. I don't know who said this. I think Ali Webb or someone who I recently like saw speak, but it's really about blending. And I think that's something that really resonated with me. For me, it's really about this idea of, work for me is a passion point, right? Being with my family is a passion point. And I don't necessarily think of it as like one balancing the other. And so for me, I try to give myself a lot of grace. Like if I need to work because I want to work on something, I'm really excited about that, I do that. If I need to be offline to be with my kids and go pick them up and I'm going to spend the afternoon with them, I'm going to do that. So for me, I feel very like privileged and fortunate to be in the position to be able to make those decisions. But I think, even as you're kind of growing in your career, I think a lot of people will talk about this balance and this perfect like time of work-life balance and time off versus time on. And for me, it's if you can find a career and that you get as much enjoyment and fulfillment out of as much as your personal life, it's really about blending those things. So, my kids, see me working and they ask me questions about it. And I take trips, for business trips, but then, we'll tack on 2 days to, stay and with my kids and they'll come there. So for me, I think it's really about figuring out that blend of how to balance the things that I really care about the most in my life and not apologizing or feeling bad about, those things really intersecting a lot of times, which they do all the time.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I used to get irritated by when people are, how do you balance everything, especially being a mom? Like, oh, not anymore, because that's a question I think every person who's working and have family, they think about it. So Jolene, I totally agree with you. It's like a work-life blend. That's what I call it, or work-life integration, because there's no such thing as balancing. Work is not the opposite of life. It's all our integral part of our life. Especially with COVID, we understood that very well. And so we cannot artificially create boundaries between work and life, that if you win in one, you lose out on another. I think that we should just completely not think like that. There has to be synergy between all the areas that define our life. So it will be work, it will be friends, family, community, your health. It all kind of blends together, integrates together. And there will be days where I'll give my 200% to work. And on other days, as a mom, I might give 200% on some project that my kid is doing. Right now, actually, I'm building first day posters that I'm really good at, actually. So that will be my project. I'll give 100% to that. And it's okay. These choices are okay. We don't have to give 100% to everything on every single day.
It's really, I mean, just building on it. It's so hard, and there's no perfect formula. I mean, there's no perfect way. And I know as I reflect on my career, there have been periods in my life where I have been extremely bad at it. And it has been all about work, and I've kind of lost everything, including identity in like outside of work, because my identity was so wrapped up inside the work that I was doing. I think it's particularly challenging when you're in a career that motivates you and invigorates you and you love it so much. Like I love my career and I love what I do. So it's easy to dedicate that time. I do think that, one of the wake-up calls for me is, getting married does something. I mean, it's obviously a chapter in a significant milestone that creates kind of an opportunity to reflect on things that are very important and also have a literal voice outside of work to pay attention to. And kids are obviously another big thing. And so for me, that's been a reorientation for me. Not everybody has the same family situation either, but I do think that there are things outside of work, kind of to the point Prachi, that you're making, that having a balanced life, I think makes you actually better at work. One of the things that has been helpful for me as a tool, just to think about it, is I do think often about like legacy, like what is the legacy? Morbidly, what's it say on my tombstone? The proverbial tombstone. But I think that if it's entirely anchored in work, then that to me is not something that works for me. I want it to be anchored in things that that are broader and more holistic. And I'd say that family does come above that, though it doesn't take the intensity away from work, but it does allow me to prioritize my time more effectively outside of work.
I have to add to this because as a father of 3 young kids, 7 to 10, it is very challenging to balance, all the things that you have to do from not only from a work standpoint, travel, and also, family and personal stuff. And I think what Jolene said is key. And this is something that it helped me a lot because I figured out I was younger in terms of what is my passion point, what makes me excited, what am I going to be able to wake up to every morning and feel excited about and feel recharged. That should be what you do every day. And it's something that everybody needs to prioritize. Everybody needs to figure that out. And then if you can find a job that you could be happy with, it doesn't really become something that is seen as work. It's just something that you have to do. And then you can balance that with your priorities. Is it family? Is it, do you want to get other things done, personal hobbies, etc.? And then don't compromise. This is, if you understand your priorities clearly, you love what you do, you got most of that equation to figure it out. And, it's all about how do you find time, just be organized with that. But again, those things that I just talked about before really has to come first. You got to know what you want to do. That doesn't seem like a burden that's going to recharge you and energize you every morning.
Jeff, you're making me think, I mean, like as a reminder, I think it's a poignant point. There are some companies that are not compatible with what your overall objectives as a human on the planet are. And it's worth acknowledging. I mean, I've had those experiences where as much as I want to prioritize something other than work is not playing that game appropriately or effectively with me. And it's worth acknowledging, not to say that work isn't important. It is, and it's what we spend a lot of time doing, but being able to recognize when the company is not working for you is something to be honest with yourself with, because it makes a difference, and oftentimes it doesn't get better.
Oh, I love how everyone is so passionate about the balance and blending of personal and professional, because I think early in my career I really struggled to do that, and now I'm in a place where I have finally understood how to blend personal and professional life. And I know it's not something easy to do, but I really loved and appreciate everyone's answer here. And actually, because of timing, because I see there's a lot of Q&A questions for the Q&A section, I think we're going to just skip right to the last question, which is for the whole panel group. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self? Jolene, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think, I've always been a fairly ambitious person. I feel like I have a lot of goals, and I try to set a lot of a high bar for myself. And I think especially as a young person, I was really kind of tough on myself a lot, I think, on the things I wanted to do and the things I wanted to achieve. And I think I always felt like I maybe didn't have enough time to do it or to get there. And I spent a lot of time, I think, in comparison, looking at my peers and looking at other people and really kind of feeling just not great about where I was professionally or personally. And I think, especially in my 20s and 30s, I feel like I've learned to kind of give myself a lot of grace, and then also just understand that sometimes those big disappointments or things that feel like real setbacks actually are the things that will lead to new opportunities that are really meant for you, and the kind of bigger things that you maybe didn't see. And I know it's very difficult when you're kind of in a period of time where it seems like things just really are not working out, to kind of think that way. But I think just like exercising that idea of like gratitude and grace, like I wish I had done that a little bit more when I was younger. And I whenever I meet a young person, I'm always like, that's what I wish for you, is to like give yourself that grace and latitude to like be able to figure it out, because it will work itself out.
Amazing. And Jeff, any words of advice for your younger self?
No, I think a lot to what Chris said. One of the things I wish I did probably more when I was younger is to value myself more. I think I come from a culture with very critical parents, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. And frankly speaking, that doesn't necessarily build the confidence that you need to get to where you want to be. And it makes us always think, is it us? We're always much more critical of ourselves, rather than seeing the situation and saying, maybe that situation isn't good enough for me. And so that's one thing I would say to all of us, is that, be less critical of yourself, value yourself more, and really, give yourself the opportunity to get what you want by making the right decisions.
Chris, any advice for your younger self?
Yeah, I think there's a common theme. There's definitely a common thread with what we're all saying. I think that, as I reflect on my career, I think that there have been moments where I've been very focused on achieving an objective, and many of those things have come true. But you can also get lost in trying to achieve that objective and completely lose sight of where you're at the moment. And I'm going to get the quote wrong because I didn't look it up in advance, and I should have, but I think it was Doc Hudson in Pixar Cars, part of my portfolio, that said it's not just about the destination, but it's about the journey and the friends you make along the way, something like that. And quite honestly, I think I've done an okay job, but I know that there are moments and opportunities that I left aside because I just wasn't focused on those things, and really didn't take the moment to actually appreciate where I was, what I was doing, and who I was doing it with, because I was so focused on wanting to get to that next thing. And so I would tell myself, like, just chill out, dude. Like, it's okay. Enjoy, because these are going to be the moments you reflect back on and really cherish. But it's also kind of something I'm telling myself right now. I mean, enjoy these moments. Your kids are not going to be this age. You're not going to be at this stage or working on these things. Go and watch the Barbie movie one more time. I mean, it's like, enjoy the moment.
And then Prachi, any advice for your younger self, young little Prachi?
Oh, well, where do I start? There are so many. I'm trying to find what is the best advice. And I'll say with a kind of like my advice would be with a reality check. Stereotyping is real. It still exists in this day and world. How do we, my advice to my younger self will be, own your own narrative. Tell people how to think about you, because people form their own impressions on what they see. You have to tell them how to see yourself, how you want to be perceived. I think that is extremely important. I never did that initially in my early career. And then I decided, if I heard a quote from, I don't know if you've heard from Dr. AMC, it's very powerful. It's called "Nothing Hidden Heals." And it just kind of forces you to realize the importance of telling your truth and your stories for any kind of change to happen. And by change to happen, I mean, not just for others, but in you as well. So kind of introspection is needed. I did that 5-10 years ago. And then that happened, and that's why I started owning my narrative. Where do I want to go? What do I want to be? You have to own it, and you have to tell the world what you want to be, because otherwise we will always be that model minority, hardworking, keep your head down, working. Versus if you want to be something else, you have to tell your own story.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for this amazing panel opportunity, but fun doesn't stop now. I'm actually going to pass it off now to Christina, who's going to lead the Q&A section of our portion. So if anyone else has any questions, please drop them in the comments, because I know I already see so many questions and so many people are like, yearning to hear you guys' answers. So I'm very excited for this next part for people to hear you guys' direct answers.
Yes, thank you, Liz, and thank you, panelists. Can we I know we're virtual, but oh my gosh, what an amazing panel group. And if you guys haven't noticed, the chat has been blowing up with questions. Everybody's super excited. A lot of amazing insights that you guys have shared with us. So Jeff, Prachi, Chris, Jolene, thank you all so much for sharing all these personal stories with us. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in some of the questions that has been populated into the chat. I'm going to share the first one. Somebody had asked, how can young people find opportunities to work their way up?
I think that, yes, do the job that you're hired to do, but I think it's also a lot of kind of working your way up is also reading kind of the room, reading and anticipating the things that maybe people aren't doing that could be done, or kind of thinking about, I know for me, like I would always kind of, especially as a young person working, always try to anticipate things that might not have been done, and think about how to execute those things, as well as like just kind of meeting other people and trying to shadow them and figure out how to kind of support other people that maybe were outside of my job, description, but really, thinking about how I could raise my hand and ask how I can support others too. So I think it's really a lot about, putting yourself out there, asking questions, and then not too many questions because people don't love that, but asking questions, and then also looking for ways that you can help or anticipate the help that people might want and need. I actually did all through college. I was a waitress. It's how I paid for college, and I embarrassingly also waitress and bartender for 3 years after school, after I got my first job, because I would work in advertising during the day and work as a bartender at night to pay my bills because New York City is very expensive. And I actually think that working in hospitality was so critical. It was so helpful for me as a young person, like getting to read people, to understand like things that they might want and need without saying it, verbalizing it. And then also just being able to really like anticipate how to help other people. I think actually really helped serve me in the long run, not just financially, but also, being able to carry that into my work. And I think that's something I always encourage people to do, is like, think about work as like hospitality in some ways too. It's like, how can you help other people around you? How can you support other people? And think about it beyond just your job and your silo.
I just to jump in here too. I hire a lot of younger people, and I think the two main important things we look for is obviously attitude and aptitude. And so, you're not going to know everything when you're first starting out, but your attitude carries such a huge importance. Your ability to want to get to know people, like Jolene said, to, show that energy that you're here to help support people. You're here to learn, asking for questions, asking for projects. That positive attitude is going to be visible for sure. And it's going to impact the entire team that you work with. The other piece is aptitude, being able to learn as much as you can. When you're younger, you want to absorb as much information, that would actually help you further on in your career. And so try to learn as much as possible. And I think people appreciate that you actually are showing interest, not just doing the bare minimum. You really want to get to know more. You want to be able to support. You want to be able to help. That's kind of what we look for, in terms of younger stars that are coming up, and really being able to reward them for that next role.
I want to plus one on that, Jeff, because it is so true. And I know of very practical examples where the aptitude was met, but the attitude was not, and choices were made that chose people that maybe didn't even have the level of aptitude of another candidate, but were chosen because they did have the attitude and the orientation that is like, hey, I'm here to help. And it's not all, everybody has self-interest, but it's not all about self-interest. I'm here as somebody that people want to work with. That makes a huge, huge difference. And oftentimes the attitude piece is even more important than the aptitude piece. After all, we're all human. We all want to work with people we want to work with. We want to get the job done. So aptitude is important, but my goodness, somebody that's hard to work with, makes it very, very challenging.
Yeah, we've all been there in a situation where I feel like we have to get the job done, but oh my gosh, it would be so much easier and we get it done so much faster if we just all would be able to work together better. I love these insights. Thank you so much. We have more questions. Another one is, have you all invested heavily in coaches or prioritized mentorship or advocacy on your journey to C-suite? I know earlier we had talked about how important that mentorship was, that sponsorship was, building your network. So this was a burning question from the chat, and I also dropped it in the chat for your reference.
I can answer that question. Yes, I wouldn't say invested heavily, but definitely invested in coaches and absolutely a network. Because it's very important to be visible. Being visible is extremely important. Number two, the reason for me to invest in coaches is kind of setting up that vision. And we talked about how do you get to your way up, kind of defining what does that mean? What does that mean to be way up? Like, what are you looking for? And kind of putting some specificity and goals to it is extremely important. And that's what coaching workshop does for you. And that also helps you understand what are your gremlins. And that's a very interesting topic, and meaning what is stopping you is what is in you yourself that is stopping you. And I found what are my gremlins, and I worked on it for a few years, and I'm still working on it. So I think that's what coaching does and network does for you. A network also helps you understand, validate your experiences, or act as a sounding board, along with helping you get to those opportunities. So I'll say absolutely those are extremely important, because we're all smart people here. It means there's no question about it, right? But how do you get to that next level? I think these things matter a lot in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to sort of have that sounding board, like you're saying, identifying those gremlins are really important to be able to kind of grow. Let's see. The next question is, how do you give back to mentors and sponsors to show gratitude and appreciation? I think this might come from a place of, a lot of us want mentorship or sponsorship. It might feel a little bit intimidating to ask for it. Kind of what's in it. I know you alluded to this maybe a little bit earlier, Prachi, too, about like it's a two-way relationship, but some of us might feel a little bit like, how do we kind of give back to you guys?
I had this as a topic discussion in some of my mentorship classes, and believe it or not, the fact that you actually ask somebody, that mentor in itself is going to feel appreciated, that and feel good that you actually even asked. And I think just being able to take in that advice and thank that mentor for what they did, and also keep in touch, is, believe it or not, quite more rewarding than you would think. One of the things that I didn't realize, as I, got up to this level, is just how much others actually cared about my opinion. I was always just kind of worried about myself and what I need to do to get to where I need to be. I had no idea that I've started to become, somebody whose, opinion others really care about. And believe it or not, once I realized that, it's actually really rewarding to me that I was able to help somebody else. And so the point I'm trying to make is, don't shy away from asking. Be proactive in asking. Believe it or not, they're not as busy as you think. And that conversation with you is probably quite rewarding to them in a way that is better than their day-to-day in general, because at least they know that they've helped somebody. So that's the perception that we have to break through, that, we may be annoying, people don't care about us. It's really just be proactive and go out there and ask for help.
Building on that, Jeff, I think that one of the things that can get confused, I've seen it happen with mentees where they'll engage and they'll ask, and oftentimes what they're looking for is advocacy and not mentorship, and it can get confused. And by the way, a good mentor that really is picking up what you're putting down can be an advocate for a mentee. So it can work that way, but that's not, to me, I don't know that that's the cost of entry. It kind of goes back to what you're saying, Jeff. I totally agree with. I think the biggest reward, at least the thing that fuels me, there is engagement, and there's kind of a sense of like, well, my words matter and I can help somebody. So there's that aspect of benefit. But what I really want to see from a mentee is that they are learning and illustrating those learnings through behaviors, and also keeping up their side of the bargain. If they're asking for mentorship, that they're actually putting in the work to be a mentee that is truly engaging and seeking to learn. Again, not just making the connection for advocacy, but actually making the connection to learn.
Wow, that's really great. Yes, I think the last thing you would want is to spend your time, giving advice and helping someone and then not seeing them follow through on maybe the advice that you're giving. Another question that we have is, while working hard is a poorly worn badge of honor, as we know, we are very stereotyped to kind of put our heads down, work really hard. How have you worked smarter to kind of get to your C-suite level?
I'm happy to jump in here. So I was actually recently talking to people that have recently been promoted to like a leadership level internally at my agency. And they were, like, oh, I don't want to have to give this thing to this person because I'm gonna have to like spend a lot of time, showing them how to do it. And, it's going to take a lot of, there were just like a lot of impatience, this idea of like having to take the time to like show someone how to do something. And I think, I said to them, having them do this, even if it's 60% wrong, but 40% done, would that be helpful to you? And they said, yeah, that would be like a time saving thing for me. And then I could, kind of coach them through the last 60%. And I said, and I think that's something that we maybe, and I said to them, well, then it's worth it, because I think sometimes we kind of think, oh, we have to just do it all ourselves to get it done correctly. And I think sometimes shifting that attitude of, I can actually show someone how to do something, and even if they take a stab at it, it's not correct, it still saves me a lot of time, because I'll have half of it done, and two, I could show them how to do it perfectly next time, so that next time, there's none of that like learning curve. And I think, a lot of kind of that working smarter is figuring out those efficiencies of the things that you personally have to do versus the things that you can maybe outsource or figure out how to teach someone else to do so they can help you next time. Versus always feeling like you have to do it all yourself. I know that's something that I really challenged myself with, where I would always kind of be like, oh, I don't want to bother anyone, or I don't want to have to ask someone to do this or train someone how to do this. I'm going to just do this myself. And, I think it's really about thinking about where are the points in your day that you can add the most value, that you can be the most effective and have the most impact, and dedicate your time to those things. And then those other things, think it's okay to maybe outsource or ask other people for help on. And even if those things aren't done completely to the way that you would want them to be done, you can, kind of coach it there.
I think it's a huge point. And, there aren't more hours in the day. And the reality is, in most cases, the higher you get, the less time you have. It's just kind of the fact of how it works. So rethinking kind of what are the activities versus what is the impact is an orientation, depending on where you are and what your role is in an organization. Generally, impact becomes much more important than the activities. I also think something that you brought up, Jolene, I think is a really good one. And I actually think that it lands, in my opinion, a little bit different with Asians than it does maybe with others that are part of the majority, from the point of view of like feeling comfortable with delegation. I actually think it's a thing. I know. I mean, I've felt it. As you get into a position where delegation becomes a critical mechanism for getting the job done, how comfortable are we at raising into those levels? By the way, there are moments oftentimes in your career where you suddenly find yourself above somebody or a group of folks that you were beside the day before. So delegation becomes even more of this kind of complex mind situation that I think is only compounded by depending on how you grew up, but I can hear it and I can feel it through some of the things that I learned and experienced growing up that make me feel uncomfortable being the boss in moments where you play that role. That is the role and the expectation.
Yeah, just adding last point to that, absolutely, Chris, delegation. And I'll say on that point of activity versus impact, I remember when I was early in my career, one of my bosses gave me this gem. I'll say, like, is this the $1,000 work that you would like to do? If not, then delegate. When I was a new manager, and I always remember that. Is this the work I want to spend time on? Is that actually going to create impact? So having that, it's very important. And I'll say, add one last point about how do you getting into the C-suite. Being visible, building your executive presence is extremely important, along with what Jolene, you and Chris mentioned. Because if you're not visible, out of sight, out of mind, that's what happened initially. So how do you build your presence? I deliberately invested in my public presence 6 years ago because it was needed. And believe it or not, it works. And once you start doing it, you yourself build confidence and validation. That imposter syndrome goes away. And then it all kind of like, it's all hand in hand. People see you, you see yourself as well. So I think add that to the list, build your executive presence.
And my quick add to that is just never be satisfied in terms of what you're doing. If you're comfortable, it means you're probably not learning as much. You're probably more capable of solving bigger problems. So, taking on bigger tasks is going to allow you to learn more. And obviously that will be more visible as well. And, so just don't continue to do the same old mundane things. Always be learning, always be trying different things.
Wow. Thank you guys. Even more insight from having an important public presence, the importance of delegation, having a good attitude and showing up. I love it. And I think everybody in the audience really appreciates the extra detail that you guys shared here. Jolene, Chris, Jeff, Prachi, thank you so much again for this amazing hour with you guys. I can't believe we're already at time. It always goes by so quickly, and we really, really, again, appreciate the time that you've spent here with us. We're leaving feeling more inspired, and it really helps feel great that we're kind of all going through sort of the same challenges, regardless of kind of where we are in our careers. So thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's great.
Thank you. Also, teasing out some events that are coming up. We have our matchmaking event on Thursday, February 29th of next year. It's going to be an amazing breakout session where you can network and meet other Asians. We also have local in-person events. Follow our social to get more details, because that will be coming up in the next few weeks. And some quick things, AdColor named us an honoree for being a catalyst. So we're super proud and really excited about that. Our third season of our podcast is coming up with co-founder Bernice and other board member Ariba. So tune into that in September. And if you haven't grabbed a copy yet of our Visibility Mindset book by our co-authors, Bernice and Jolene, we are dropping those links in the chat for you to check it out. And finally, I know we talked so much about the importance of networking, building your network, especially as you're getting further along in your career. It doesn't stop here. Keep networking, keep talking. We just would love to connect with you. We're dropping a link in the chat to our networking deck. Fill it out, find us and others, make a friend, and join our private LinkedIn group. With that, thank you all so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it, and hope you have a great day.